prepared here. Ready?
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber's annual breakfast with the superintendents. Obviously, we're not having breakfast this morning. For those of you who aren't familiar with the program, we've probably been doing this for almost 10 years now. And in a regular world, at a regular time, we would have our two superintendents join us for a breakfast meeting and essentially give a sneak peek to our members and residents as to what happened with the schools over the summer and the preparations that were made in anticipation of the beginning of the new year. Obviously, this is a year like no other, and I'm sure both Patrick and Mark are still working furiously on getting their schools open and what that may look like. I know it's probably increasingly challenging when you have external forces at the state level and even at the federal government level as well, playing a role in what you may or may not ultimately be allowed to do in terms of starting the school year. So we really appreciate both of you being on the call this morning. We're also going to hear from Craig Thiel from the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, which has been studying and advocating for education issues for more than 100 years in the state of Michigan. Just a little housekeeping before we begin. We do have, we're getting up to 45, 50 people on the call. We know many of you probably have questions and many of you may have similar questions. So what we're going to ask you to do, instead of asking your question live, if you could simply type your question into the chat box, because we're, like I said, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of very similar questions. And then whichever ones have the most common themes, I will then throw those out to Patrick and Mark. So that's how we're going to be doing that. With that, I want to introduce first our presenting sponsor for this morning. That is the Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union. Very strong and long-standing partner with the Birmingham Bloomfield Chamber. Great local business in our community, and they for several years have been the presenting sponsor for this program. And I believe I'm going to start with Linda Hatfield, who is the Vice President of Marketing for the Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union, only because in my advancing years my eyes are failing and they're kind of far away from the camera, so I can't exactly see who else is with Linda. So Linda, why don't you start us off this morning?
Well, thank you very much, Joe, and thank you all for joining us this morning. And Joe, I always have to ask you, how long do I have? Is it 20 minutes or what? I keep forgetting.
That'd be 2 minutes.
Okay, there, just saying. I always like to make sure I ask first. No, we, as Joe said, we've been the presenting sponsors of this wonderful event, and our relationship with the Chamber has been immensely successful, and we thank the Chamber also for all they're doing, even during these challenging times. A little bit about the credit union. For 89 years, the Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union has served the community. Our original field of membership was the Birmingham Teachers, hence our name, Birmingham Teachers Credit Union. Several years ago, we changed the name to BBCU and served all of Oakland County. Well, recently we gained approval to expand our field of membership to the entire state of Michigan. So anybody who works, worships, or attends school in Michigan can become a member of Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union. But we're also pleased we have exciting news because we just had a recent merger of two credit unions, Metro North Credit Union and Lakes Community Credit Union. And we felt that all three credit unions have shared core values, a similar vision, dedication to high-level service, and the merger served right now as an exciting opportunity to deliver top-notch experience to our members. We now have 7 locations, and being a shared branch allows us to serve members from other credit unions as well. So that we have a lot of people that come into the credit unions from other credit unions. So really, and we are serving the credit union families in the industry, and that means a lot to us. So you are also welcome to come in. With all this happening, the most important thing, though, for today is we've never forgotten where we started, and that was with the teachers. So our relationship, we value it with the Birmingham and the Bloomfield Hill schools. We feel the schools are a key factor in the community, and anything we can do to support them, especially now during these challenging times, we are here for you. And I honestly feel very confident looking at the two leaders in front of me that both schools, that our students are going to be in great hands with Mark and Pat at the head of the school districts. I would just like to quickly acknowledge, even though you can't see him, Joe, to my right here is Richard Perry, and Richard Perry is actually the Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union chairman of the board, who happened to be the superintendent of finance of Birmingham schools. He retired a few years ago. I'm not going to say how many, but he just retired a few years ago, and he has been our chairman of the board. It's great. To my left is Sam Shabander. He is our new CFO of the Birmingham Bloomfield Credit Union. He came from Lakes Community, a wonderful asset to the credit union. Also on Zoom in his office is Jim Boiler. He is our IT and marketing guru. And in another room is Rebecca Gilroy, and she's my right hand. So with that, if you want to know any information about the credit union and our products and services, please go on our website, or you might as well come and visit us because all our branches are open and we'd love to see you. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Linda. Well, at this point, it's my pleasure to introduce Craig Thiel. Craig is the research director for the Citizens Research Council of Michigan.
Okay.
He has been with them as a full-time researcher since 2006. Prior to that, he served in state government in both the State House and State Senate fiscal agencies, and began his professional career with the Environmental Protection Agency. As I mentioned, the Citizens Research Council celebrated its centennial in 2016 and has really been a driving force for policy issues related to education. So Mark, take it away. Craig, I'm sorry.
Well, thank you, Joe. I have a slide deck I'm going to go through here in hopes of setting up Patrick and Mark's comments about how they're going to deal with the upcoming school year. A couple disclaimers before I get going. The first disclaimer is a lot of charts and graphs because we're talking school finance. And the second disclaimer is I hope you have had your breakfast already, because some of the numbers in here are going to spoil your appetite. It's just the unfortunate truth about where we're at. So let me start. Let me see here. Yeah, let me start with kind of looking at K through 12 funding in the broader picture of the state budget. And these two charts here break out the state budget two different ways. First, on the left is the entire state budget. This is all operating funds, federal resources, state resources that go into the state budget and that are decided upon in Lansing every year. And you can see school aid makes up a little over 0.25% of the overall state budget. By far the largest piece is the Health and Human Services budget that houses the Medicaid program. So in terms of statewide priorities, school.
Excuse me, Craig, we can't see your screen. Do you have the screen share on?
Let me double check here.
We did a test run, so it worked.
Share screen. Oh, there we go. I didn't hit the share button. There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
You got it?
See it now. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you could go to screen show.
Screen show. I just have new share. Your screen stop.
Slideshow. Yeah, it's on the bottom right. You're close. The little screen there on the bottom. There, that's it.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so I'm back at looking at the statewide budget. Obviously, education is important. It's the second largest piece. And then if we look over at the general fund budget, which is the piece of the overall budget that the legislature has the most discretion over, you can see school aid is a much smaller piece. By and large, that's because the state funds K through 12 education out of the school aid fund. But looking at this general fund piece, it's important to point out some large pieces that are in play. Again, health and human services constitutes about 40% of the overall budget, followed by corrections and higher education. Those three pieces collectively make up about 70% of the overall budget. This is important when we look at, what the problems are going to be in the state general fund and where the legislature is going to have to focus its attention. So as I mentioned, the school aid fund, it accounts for about 70% of overall K through 12 operating funds. The other pieces, about 20% comes from the local 18 mil property tax and about 10% more or less from federal resources. This slide here breaks out the state school aid fund by revenue source. Again, I want to point out the components here are important because these are the pieces that are subject to economic variation, business climate, the overall situation in Michigan in terms of economics. Sales tax, obviously the largest piece, about 6 million, and then 6 billion, and then over on the income tax, about 3 billion. Collectively, these pieces constitute, again, about 70% of the overall school aid fund. So as we've seen the economy contract with COVID, these are the pieces that are really most impacted and are therefore impacting school finances. If we take a look at what happened to the school aid fund over time, this chart goes back to 2001, looks at both the actual dollars collected in the school aid fund, that's the orange line, and you can see kind of a slow growth period from 2001 through 2010. This shouldn't surprise folks who realize during this period Michigan was struggling with the dot-com recession, the early part of the 2000s, and of course the later part of the 2000s we see the effects of the Great Recession. But since the recovery, since 2012, we've seen school aid fund revenue grow in excess of inflation. And the blue line in the chart kind of shows the picture of school aid fund resources after we've adjusted for inflation. And clearly there's really three phases here, three portions in this growth chart. The first piece, the downward decline in revenues over the first 10 years of the millennium. And then we can see since 2012, revenues have outpaced inflation, growing from about 12.5 billion to 13.5. And then the third phase is this period that we're entering now, which is a period of sharp decline, both in terms of the actual dollars, but also after we adjust for inflation. The key point to draw out here is that, and these are the revenue forecasts coming out of the state, the most recent ones, is that going out to 2022, which is as far as the forecast goes, we still don't return to where we are in 2019 in terms of school aid revenues once we've adjusted for inflation. So the picture looking forward is a little bleak. And this is to contrast with what schools have been dealing with over the last 4 or 5 years, which has been fairly strong revenue growth. We see this in terms of their fiscal health improving since the Great Recession, and that they've been able to put some socks of money away for a rainy day. We've seen fund balances statewide grow in the last 5 years from 1.5 billion to 2.5 billion. And then if we look at the districts and how much reserves they have in store for that rainy day relative to their revenue, we can see the number of districts that are above 20% growing. In fact, about 1/2 of the districts have at least 20% of the revenue in reserve. So if there's a good story coming out of this morning is that school districts have been prudent. They've been saving for this rainy day. The question is just how much rain's going to be coming. And let me give you a picture of that. This is a chart that looks at the fiscal year 2020 revenue estimates and the 2021 revenue estimates for the school aid fund and the general fund. And what I'm showing here is what those estimates were back in January before COVID, and then most recently in May. And we can see the effect that the economic downturn has had on the school aid fund. The revenue change just in that short period, the state is expecting about a 9% decline. On the general fund side, which is more heavily dependent on income tax than sales tax, and also doesn't have the benefit of the state education tax, which is fairly stable. The general fund seeing double that decline between January and May. And then if we look out to 2021, again, looking at the change from January's estimate to May, we see very similar reductions. I would point out that year over year, we're going to see growth from 2020 to 2021, but the problem is that the initial hit is so massive that by the time we hit 2021, we aren't anywhere close to where we were in 2019 in terms of the revenue. And one thing I was able to look back in history, the school aid fund is going to be down about 6.5% between 2019 and 2020. This is the largest single year decline in the history of the fund, and it outpaces what happened with the Great Recession. Again, just another picture of what's going on with COVID and its impact on state revenues. This chart goes back to the Great Recession, 2008, 2009, looks at the annual change in general fund, school aid fund, and we can see that the reduction in the general fund about on par with the Great Recession, school aid fund larger than what was experienced during the Great Recession. The tail end here is that growth I'm mentioning year over year coming out of this initial hit. But again, the base for state revenues is reset with this sharp decline in 2020. So obviously those revenue shortfalls translated into budget shortfalls. The school aid fund in May was identified as having a $1.1 billion deficit. As Mark and Patrick will tell you, most of the spending had been completed by that point. And by the time that the legislature got around to solving the 2020 problem, it really had very few tools at its disposal as far as adjusting spending. And so what really went into the solution for last year's budget, because of the late timing, was transfers from various state funds to make whole the state school aid fund. So we saw $350 million taken out of the state's rainy day fund, shifted over to K-12. We saw $200 million taken out of the state's general fund, shifted over to K-12. And then finally, repurposing the federal coronavirus funding that came down in the first stimulus package. All told, education budgets were held harmless, K through 12, community colleges, and higher ed. There was no cuts to K through 12 classroom funding. Again, largely because the school year had more or less been completed at that point. The legislature did add an additional $256 million for COVID-related expenses, acknowledging that schools were dealing with increased expenses. I'm sure Mark and Patrick will tell you that's not anywhere near what is needed to address the challenges that they face. And because of the nature of the solution to the 2020 deficit, transferring funds from various state funds and the federal, it means that this billion deficit really carries over into the next year. And this chart that you see right now is an attempt to kind of show you the makeup of that budget solution. Again, almost 90% of this solution is just transferring one-time transfers from other funds into the school aid fund. So what that does is basically kick the school aid deficit into next fiscal year. This is a challenge again, mainly because the revenues are down, but also because we've started the school year. So schools began their fiscal year on July 1. By the time the legislature gets around to solving this deficit problem, they will be 2 months into the school year. The general fund's going to face about a $2.5 billion shortfall this coming up fiscal year. That's about 28% of the revenue. If you think back to that chart I put up early on about the general fund budget, 2.5 billion represents about half of the Health and Human Services budget. It collectively accounts for the entirety of the corrections budget and the higher education budget put together. So it's very sizable problem. Over on the school aid fund, another $1 billion shortfall. If this were applied just as a per pupil reduction across the state, it'd be about $650 per pupil. Very substantial reduction. Historically, the largest cut that the districts have taken was 470. So this is about a 50% increase over that reduction. The state revenue estimates are going to be updated again in August. This is a rare occurrence, but because of the delay in state income tax filings that the state allowed, there really wasn't a super clear picture what revenues were going to do back in May, so they've scheduled another revenue conference for August 24th. That just means that we won't see budget action until later in September, probably right up to the deadline of October 1. That's not good news for schools, again, as they've already started their fiscal year. Just some considerations that are going on in Lansing and the capital. You know, how much federal funding is going to be available for schools and when. As of right now, the federal the bill going through the Senate has $100 billion nationally for schools. This is probably just the first piece of a larger piece for schools and local governments, but as of right now, that's what the federal resources look like. We have no idea what the general fund budget problem is going to do to school aid fund. We've seen in the past where the general fund budget problems kind of seep over into the school aid fund. The rainy day fund was healthier before 2020. It's less healthy now. And again, we'll see if the legislature decides to tap into that for schools or for some other purpose. And then, you know, the big picture, I think, is what does K-12 fit into Lansing's priorities when it comes to budgeting? Clearly, the 2020 picture was to hold school districts harmless. It'll really be a tough challenge for that to occur again in 2021, but the nature of what the school aid fund's going to have to do to get into balance is really up in the air right now. So I ran through that pretty quick. I'll turn it back over to whoever's the MC here.
Thank you very much, Craig, for that somewhat sobering fiscal outlook for public education, but I'm sure probably nobody is too surprised by the projections that you're showing, given what's going on. Next, we're going to hear from Patrick Watson. Patrick became superintendent of schools for Bloomfield Hills in December 2019. It was his very first application to become a superintendent, and I don't know if you're rethinking your career move, but boy, talk about baptism by fire. So prior to that, he was with the West Bloomfield schools since 1994. He was a teacher, assistant principal, and principal before becoming the athletic director, and then ultimately deputy superintendent. Principal at West Bloomfield High School for his last 5 years before he made the jump from administering one school to a whole district. So Patrick, welcome. And I'm sure people are anxious to hear of what is in store for our kids attending Bluefield Hill schools.
Appreciate it. I'm not sure if I really want to present after all those numbers. Those are definitely really sobering. But I'll start with the positive. The positive is the same positive we have every time this year. We have great communities and we have great students. And our students aren't looking at the numbers. Our students don't care about the numbers. Our students want to learn in whatever fashion they can. And they want a teacher that cares about them, that builds relationships. So that's our number one priority we're looking at as we prepare for school. This whole thing with COVID has kind of set everyone back. I mean, typically this time of year, in my mind, I'm thinking, plan your work, work your plan. This year, expect the unexpected. To some extent, it's almost like a reality TV show. You never know what the next turn's going to be or what's going to happen. And I think that's caused us really in education to shift our mindset a little bit, which I think is another positive. Sometimes you'll hear people say, think outside the box, or how could you reimagine school or do school differently? Kind of what I've challenged every staff member to do is kind of work as if there is no box, because things are going to constantly change. If you asked me in March what school is going to look like this year, I would have said, hey, we'll be pretty much back to normal. Everyone will come in the first day. We'll have a few precautions, but it'll be fine. You know, kids will play sports and go on summer vacations. Obviously, I was a little too optimistic and probably a little naive. That's not what took place. If you asked me in June when COVID cases in Michigan were in the teens, what would school look like? Again, optimistic. Again, probably a little naive. Things are changing rapidly. We need to continue to adapt. And so now, as part of our plan in Bloomfield Hills, we've really been looking at how do we provide in-person learning for those that want it, in a virtual experience for those who want it, and really make sure our students get what they need. We're looking at 3 different groups: our parents, our students, and our teachers. And their needs and their wants with COVID-19 simply don't align. They don't. They want different things, they need different things, they have different expectations. So a lot of our work is kind of trying to see how we can align those 3 groups to meet more of their needs. So we have another Board of Education presentation coming up on the 20th. We're reworking a new plan, a plan that we want to make sure that those 3 groups I just mentioned, our parents, our students, and staff, have something they can believe in, something they feel comfortable with, and something that they can rally behind. And it's going to be challenging. You know, I talked to quite a few parents last night after a letter that came out, and everyone, you know, really wants absolutes. Tell me what it's going to look like. If we do it, what is it going to look like? Well, I told you what it was going to look like before, and it changed. I can tell you what I think it's going to look like now, and it's probably going to change. When we eventually get back to in-person learning, it's probably going to change. And that uncertainty is causing great anxiety, not just for our parents, but our students and staff, because we've never experienced this in school. Think back to your time in school. You go look at a school calendar. You knew your first day, you knew when the vacations were going to be, you knew your last day of school. You know, if things worked out, a great guy like Mark would call a couple snow days for you so you can have a snow day and go sledding. You had that full sense of certainty. If you're a teacher, you showed up in the classroom. You knew what hours you were teaching. You knew what your schedule was going to be. You knew the kids in your class. If you were a parent, well, I know it's a half day this day in October. I need to provide daycare. I know in the day before Thanksgiving is a day off now instead of a half day. I know I need to be home that day. If you're sitting home as a parent or a student or a teacher, you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And so I think it's really important that everyone understands, as you know, Mark and I both are planning for a return to school, whatever that means, whenever that happens, whatever that looks like, that everyone's trying to do the absolute best they can to meet everyone's needs, and that there simply isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. If there was, based on the research that Mark and I have both done, whether it's internationally or nationally, we would have presented that. But there simply isn't that one-size-fits-all solution. And everyone you come across is dealing with something all of us probably don't know about. So one thing I've talked to a lot of people about is make sure we treat everyone with dignity and respect. No one's making decisions to, give people less or do something people don't want. We're operating with the information we have and trying to make the best decisions we can in a difficult circumstance. But at the end of the day, the thing that makes it so that I can keep my focus and I can keep moving forward is focusing on the students. They deserve it. They're the most important thing. At the end of the day, while I'm employed by the school board and, there's other things that go with that as a job, I feel I'm ultimately responsible to the students I serve. And so I will do whatever I can to meet their needs, whether it's in-person learning or virtual. And at the end of the day, if I feel I've done everything I can for my students, at that point, it is what it is. And I can go to sleep knowing that I put in the effort to make sure the kids got what they deserve and what they need. So you probably want more plans. Well, you'll have to tune in on the 20th because we worked on it all this weekend, all yesterday. There'll be a new updated plan. It will be must-watch TV. So grab your popcorn, grab a friend. It won't be on Netflix. You'll have to live stream it from the district, but I'm excited about it. I think for those three groups I mentioned, our parents, our students, and our staff, there's something, again, that they really can rally around and really enjoy. As far as spending for COVID and COVID protocols, it is what it is. We want to have a safe environment for everyone to come back to. I've learned a lot about, whether it's the N95 mask that's foldable, the hard case N95 mask, the KN95 mask, and how that protects you from 95% of the particles. I've learned so much about plexiglass. I think I could give a lesson on it in the different types of plexiglass and how thick it needs to be and secrets to clean it. So if you have plexiglass in your home and you're not sure what to do, feel free to reach out. I can answer those questions for you as well. So learned a lot of things I never thought I would have to learn, and that's okay. I mean, that's all part of the adventure. So that's kind of where we're at right now in Bloomfield Hills. So thank you. So I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
Looks like Joe lost his connection, so I'll take over as moderator for a moment here. And unfortunately, Mr. Dodczyk, I know you've been a superintendent with Birmingham for a couple of years. Is this your third year you're going into, and you came from the Troy School District, correct?
Yes, thanks. Yeah,
Welcome.
so I want to congratulate Pat on freezing Joe, actually stopping him in his tracks. Yeah, so I've been here for a little bit more than 18 months now in Birmingham Public Schools. Before that, I was in Troy, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. So, Kelly, Joe, thanks for the invitation. Linda, thanks for your support of the chamber, and Craig, I'd like to say thank you for providing that news. I think it helps us, but I would agree it definitely is a big concern for us in public schools. It was a good presentation that I think allows everybody to know, the landscape in the state of Michigan and where public schools are headed. I want to kind of talk in two parts, if I can, for today, that I think will help everybody in the chamber group understand where Birmingham Public Schools is at right now. So it's important for me to kind of bifurcate my comments into two sections. The first section, I do want to talk about pre-COVID work in Birmingham Public Schools for just a moment. So prior to March 10th, there were some exciting things that were happening, and those are still going on, but they were given our full attention at the time. It's important for me to talk about those. And then I want to talk about post-COVID and the shutdown that goes back to the spring in March of 2020, and then talk about what our thoughts are, what our plans are kind of moving forward to the 2020-2021 school year. So to start, so pre-COVID, so I'm going to take everybody back to a better time in March 2020, where, and actually in the start of the 1920 school year in Birmingham Public Schools, where we set out to we set out from a strategic standpoint overall in the district to concentrate on four really big items. One was just taking a look at our revenue and make sure that we were well positioned with respect to how schools are funded in the state of Michigan. And so those of you remembering back to the fall of 2019, we actually had a ballot proposal that provided some Headley rollback protection for non-homestead property taxes that was well received by our voters. And we also renewed our homestead tax rates moving forward. And these are done for the next 10 years. So I think one of the big accomplishments for Birmingham Public Schools last year was just to solidify our revenue and tax base as a local school district. This is well received by the public. We were more than 70% positive in that ballot proposal. And so, you know, that for the long term and for Birmingham Public Schools was a really, really good thing. We had great leadership from the Board of Education with respect to stewarding that process and working with us collaboratively to make sure that we can make the case for voters. And so that was a big victory for us going back to the fall of 2019 to provide some, you know, again, some revenue stability moving forward. Also with that, in the summer of 2019, we announced to our public that we were engaging with Plant Moran Cressa to conduct a complete review of all of our facilities. Again, due to the leadership of the Board of Education, they tasked us with thinking about every single facility in Birmingham Public Schools that is used to provide education to our students, including our non-school buildings. And so Plant Moran Cressa did a detailed review of every single facility. And the long and short of that was a significant 10-year capital plan that took a look at needs and some wants in cases. And we shared that with our public, and that ultimately led to a bond request of voters. And so that happened. That was actually on March 10th, right? It was right the same day that the first 2 COVID cases were identified in the state of Michigan. Our voters approved that with a 74% approval rating, and we have some significant improvements across the district that are going to be going on through 2026. To make some much needed enhancements in our facilities, focused on in the big areas, our Bingham Farms Elementary and at both of our high school campuses. We're really, really excited about that. Even given the environment we're in right now, we're in the planning stages of that. We've already been able to use some technology dollars to make some purchases that I think we're going to be able to leverage in the fall with student access to technology that's going to be better than it was in the spring. So that was, again, a big strategic lift. And one that our community was supportive of. As Craig's presentation pointed out, from a budget standpoint, we've been really focused on that. Again, as tasked by our Board of Education, we made some significant changes in our budget for the 1920 school year. We effectively were able to adjust our budget to the tune of around $3.5 million in expenditure reductions heading into the 1920 school year. Those were really, really tough decisions. We tried to stay away from the classroom to every degree possible, and that was a success heading into last year. And then the final thing I do want to talk about and update the community, because I think we mentioned this a little bit at the last session. A big lift for us in Birmingham Public Schools is the establishment of a new long-term strategic plan for the district. So when I was hired in January of 2019, the previous strategic plan was just reaching its maturity. And so I was working with the Board of Education, with our central leadership team, and really all stakeholders in Birmingham to think about and initiate a new process so we could determine a new direction for the school district that was really, really sharply focused on student achievement. And we started that process. And our plan, what I want to let everybody know about, it really had two parts to it. The first part was wide stakeholder outreach so that we can involve parents, staff, our certified educators in helping us determine what our forward direction needed to be as a district based on where we're at right now as an organization. And the second and most exciting part of that unfortunately we had to put on the shelf with the school closure announced by the governor in March was a student focused, a student led, and a student delivered strategic planning process where we were working closely getting feedback from elementary students in some cases, and really leveraging the talents, skills, and ideas of our secondary students across the district. So we assembled teams representing all of our middle schools and all of our high schools. And we engaged our students in a process of taking really just a close examination of our mission statement as a district, our vision statement, where it is that we see ourselves in 5 years as a learning institution, one of the best in the state of Michigan and arguably in the country, and what were the steps we needed to take to get there. And I will tell you, this is just incredibly exciting work. I'm thinking back to a session that we had here in the EAC at the early stages. This is in the winter of 2020. And one of our middle school students, this is an 8th grader from Derby Middle School. We were talking about the mission statement, and he raised his hand, and I called on him. And he said, you know, I really want us to think about using words in our mission statement that capture the magic of Birmingham Public Schools. And the room just kind of stopped, listening to this young man talk about his experiences at Derby and how the magic of his experiences needed to be part of our purpose statement as a district. And again, this is an 8th grader. And really, I think at that moment, it really just reinforced how powerful it was and is going to continue to be, because we need to continue this process. But how powerful it was for us to go to our key stakeholders, our kids, and ask them very specifically, what do you like about what you're doing in class right now? What do we need to change? And thinking about the future of education, what steps can we take now to create a tomorrow for you that's going to be that much better? And it was real exciting. We were literally just about to deliver a new mission statement to the district, and we closed down. So those were 4 key things that, some big successes there for Birmingham Public Schools, and one that really just has an incomplete on it right now. And it's work that we're excited to continue, and I can't wait to get back to continue. So that's the first part of what I want to talk about. The second part is where we're at right now as a district, and kind of where I see us moving forward in this really obviously a challenging environment moving forward, as we all are trying to grapple with how we continue to do the things that we need to do. How do we conduct our essential business while at the same time dealing with a global pandemic that's in our backyard right now? And so I want to take everybody back to the spring. We received feedback from stakeholders after we announced our continuity of learning plan that for us really was a crisis management solution to an immediate problem of delivering education to our kids, knowing that we were going to be closed for until the end of the year. And once we kind of were moving in that virtual environment, our stakeholders said, look, I think the district needs to really just embrace everybody, all stakeholders. And so we put together, this is going back to late April, early May of 2020, we put together some internal stakeholder groups of staff members. We also created focus groups of parents who raised their hand, answered the call to be part of this process. In fact, we had to disappoint many more people than we could involve in the process, but we created some standing focus groups that helped advise us in relation to 3 key committees in Birmingham. An instruction committee that looked at what could happen in our classrooms, how do we deliver education. A committee that was dedicated to the health and well-being of all in our community, specifically focused on social emotional health and supports for those in our community, and not just kids. We were thinking about parents and also about staff. And then finally, a district safety committee that really took a look at safety protocols that needed to be in place with any potential variation of a plan come the fall. So we had parents operating to test some ideas in focus groups. And then we also had stakeholders in these various committees. It was a productive process. We got really good feedback. It helped us shape and announce to our community in June some potential options that we had with respect to the state of Michigan school phasing that the governor announced, like the different, everyone's aware of the six phases for the state of Michigan. So we could kind of think about what potential plans would look like in those phases. And we told our community as the school year was closing that we would then circle back with the latest information and research. We would take a look at the ideas that we got from our committee and then test new ideas for them. So we got our committees going again in July. We reached back out to our parent focus groups who were more than happy to help us out with the process. We initially talked about a plan that would provide a virtual option for our students and an in-person option through a half-day hybrid. And in the backdrop of this happening from late July through a study session that we had as recently as last week, we've continued to look at what's happening around us with respect to pesky numbers in Oakland County, where the 14-day trailing average was looking like it was going down. And now it's just been kind of hanging around. When we talked to our Board of Education last week, we were at 96 new cases in Oakland County on the 14-day trailing average. Right now we're at 108, and that's crept up. And we've also learned from some school districts that have already started in the South who have had outbreaks and have had to change their plans based on what's happening. And while this was going on, we really started to think about our plan, the complexity of this divided virtual and half-day hybrid model. And in the end, we had some conversations as a central leadership team, and in the end, I changed and announced to the community that we needed to amend our recommendation to our Board of Education, that we needed to go to an all virtual environment come the fall of 2020. So we have a board meeting tonight. It's at 6 p.m., a special meeting in conjunction also with a study session. We also are gonna need to talk about some bond work that we have initiated, that we'd like to make sure we're in the right frame of mind, knowing that we are gonna come back to in-person instruction, and it's our goal to do that as quickly as we possibly can. So we're gonna toggle to an all virtual environment after we have some discussion with our Board of Education, assuming that that they would accept that recommendation. And so those are our thoughts right now. And then the final thing I want to say that no matter what our considerations have been from actually pre-March, because we had led by our deputy superintendent, we had a COVID preparation committee that was meeting to try to get a handle on what some options would look like if things were to get bad in our area. But no matter what, our community, this is our parents, our students, and our staff members, have been really focused on making sure that we have mental health and well-being supports along the way. That was a priority of our continuity of learning plan in the spring. It was a priority of making sure that we were keeping tabs on families in the summer, and it will continue to be a priority as we look forward to the fall. As Pat stated, we know that the relationships that our staff members have with our kids, that's the most important tool we have in leveraging success for every kid. We know that, and we need to make sure that we're attending to their needs and supporting them every step of the way. So while it's not an ideal future, and we have committed to our community, we want to get back to in-person education as soon as we possibly can. I feel good. We actually shared with our community last night what our potential virtual schedules look like. They're very robust, far different from what we had in the spring to kind of get us to the finish line in the 1920 school year. I'm confident we'll be successful in delivering a high quality virtual education to all of our kids, even though it's not ideal. And we're going to work with our Board of Education every meeting, providing a report on where we're at with COVID as it relates to providing in-person education. And then we're going to make an announcement to the community. We've committed to doing that in November to let them know, basically what a forecast looks like for potential in-person instruction in the immediate future and on the horizon. So with that, I'll close my comments. I just, again, want to thank the Chamber for continuing with this event, even though it's happening virtually. I really appreciate everybody being here, and I appreciate your support of Bloomfield and Birmingham Public Schools. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to remind everyone, if you do have a question you'd like to ask, just simply type it into the chat room and we will get to it. So the first question is for both of you gentlemen, and I guess, Mark, it dovetails what you just said at the end about return to in-person learning at the appropriate time. The question is, what metrics and criteria would lead students being able to return to the classroom? And I guess, Mark, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Patrick.
Yeah, that's great. I was just unmuting. Thanks, Joe. So really a number of things. We're closely watching, as I shared, the 14-day trailing average in Oakland County to see what's happening around us. We're also paying very, very close attention to other school districts that have in-person learning in some environments. We're looking at multiple outbreaks in Indiana, a situation in Georgia where districts have had some in-person environment, and in Mississippi right now, where they've had the same situation. So where in-person is happening in certain locations, we're monitoring those. We're also monitoring what's happening in our local community. We have obligations to comply with FERPA and HIPAA and make sure that we're protecting the privacy of our students and their families with respect to COVID. Yet also at the same time, we need to responsibly respond to those situations, even in this incredibly limited environment right now where we're not back to school. We don't have staff reporting except for our 46-week and 52-week staff members right now that are spread out across all buildings. We have very few staff reporting. And no in-person learning happening right now in our schools. We have some activities, extracurricular activities and athletics happening. Even in this really limited, kind of entry to the fall 20 school year, we've already had 4 instances that we know of where we've had cases that we're responding to. And we've also heard of other cases in our community where we don't have positive tests, but we know people are quarantining based on information they've had. So right in our backyard, we're monitoring that. We're taking a look at what's happening in Oakland County. We're closely taking a look at what's happening in other school districts. And then finally, we're listening to feedback from our community. As I stated earlier, Joe, in my presentation, a critical part of our consideration process so far has really been listening to stakeholders, listening to staff members, working with our Board of Education, talking to parents through focus groups. It's very likely that going into the fall, considering everyone's concern about the impact that an all virtual environment could potentially have on our students, I know we're gonna conduct surveys to get the viewpoints of our parents with respect to, and our stakeholders with respect to how they feel about potentially returning. So all of those are measures that we're looking at. And the final thing that I'll say is I think people, I have heard from people that have pushed us. I've had that question from several in our community, and I've been pushed in several occasions to create a threshold that says, hey, if this occurs, then we're going to go back, or a trigger point. And that's something that at this point in time that I'm unwilling to embrace. It's hard for me to think about that because we have research that continues to change. We have information that's brought to our attention by researchers that I think we need to be mindful of. And it's really difficult for me to say right now that I'm going to take what I know right now on this particular date in August, and that's going to now determine a decision in October. I have trouble doing that. For example, there's been recent reports and research out about the significant increase in cases from 0 to 19-year-olds. It's off the charts as of recent, and that's our key clientele, 0 to 19-year-olds. That's who we serve. And so we need to be mindful of all of these statistics and the feedback of our community in order to make our decisions about potentially changing our environments for the fall of 20.
Thank you, Mark. And Patrick, before you answer, I'm going to add a kind of a related question that is specific to Bloomfield Hills Schools. And it says, it is my understanding that Bloomfield Hills Schools parents have to decide whether to be face-to-face once that starts again or virtual by August 18th, yet details of the plan will not be publicized until August 20th. Is there any way to speed up the information distribution or delay the decision date so the decisions are informed?
Right. So unfortunately, there's no way to speed up the information. Everything is constantly fluid as we speak. And we also have to get with staffing. We have one of the latest dates, August 18th, to decide between in-person or virtual. And it's making it really difficult for parents. As a parent of 3 myself, I want to know as much as I possibly can. But when we get to the 20th, even the presentation we have, by the time we get to the first week or 2 weeks of school, things may have shifted at that point. So as a parent, as difficult as it is, you need to decide, if I want to come back face-to-face, I understand that the plan might continually to change. It might be we're coming back in October. It might be we're coming back mid-September. It might be we're coming back under a phased in, where it's phased in by grade. It might come back under a hybrid model, which could be 2 days on, 2 days off, a day of asynchronous. All those things are going to continue to be fluid. And so there's no just one way to kind of nail it down. Again, if you're, a Bloomfield parent and you're still like torn, what do I do? Feel free to reach out to me or the building principal, because each one of us looks at it through the lens of our own child. And our own children need different things. And it's a difficult, decision to make. There's no easy decision. And, Mark kind of brought up the point, the metrics and things like that. We're looking at local, state, and federal guidance, which continues to change. Another thing we put together was a COVID medical task force, and quite a few of those doctors have a background in epidemiology, and so they're helping guide us. We also realized along the way that we're not medical professionals. We're educators. So as a district, we hired a director of health and wellness, Leonard Sanford Jr., who spent time at IHA in Ann Arbor, Trinity Health. He brings with the knowledge of what it is to work in a hospital. And he's going to help run our COVID-19 response throughout the school year. Because again, as educators, we don't know what we don't know. And we wanted a dedicated person who only did that job. So that's kind of where we're at, looking at metrics. What's the spread? What's the R factor? How many in Oakland County? How many in the Tri-County area? What are the different age groups? What are the contact points of infection? If you remember earlier on with COVID-19, we were so concerned, and rightfully so, that if you touch a hard surface, you touch your face, you might get it right away. And now we've realized that that's probably more minimal and it's more of an airborne disease. And so we've kind of shifted our practices. We need to continue to do that. But one highlight I forgot to share, and I don't want to mention because it is historic in Bloomfield Hills. We passed a $200 million bond with 61% of our parents voting yes. To say I was happy, I felt like I won the lottery that day. It was one of the happiest days literally of my life. So many people said, oh, Bloomfield, you'll never pass a bond. It can't happen. And every time I talk to parents, all they said is, we care about school. We care about education. Education is our number one priority. We moved to Bloomfield Hills for education. And to say that was an exciting moment is an understatement. I had a chance to go out to one of the community, like a gathering spot in one of the subdivisions. They had an outside party that I got to attend. Just a great time for the community. And the improvements we're going to make, whether it's, right sizing and going to 2 middle schools, updating all of our different elementary buildings, improvements to Bowers and not just Bowers Farm, but the Nature Center, having for our special ed students, everything's going to be ADA compliant, having therapy rooms and sensory rooms in our buildings. It really is a complete win for everyone. And so I'd be remiss not to thank everyone and just say how excited I am about that. So thank you. And Ian, I hope that answers a little bit of the question. There's just so much more to it than what's on the face value.
Thank you, Patrick. Our next question is something that we're hearing a lot about at the Chamber because it has a profound effect on the business community in terms of what do we do with working parents who are now finding their children having to be taught virtually again. So the question is, what services are being provided for the 70% of all working parents who do not have available caregiver and need to work if you're in a virtual environment? Patrick,
That is, yeah, I'll take that to start. I know this is something that has weighed incredibly heavily on us, and we understand. Our parents shared this with us early on, and it's definitely part of their thinking, and it's something that we've thought about as well. Really the heavy burden that these decisions are placing on families, given the already challenging environment that we're all in. And we don't have any, quite honestly, we don't have any really good answers there because, our need for safety and social distancing and putting some of these measures in place complicates our ability to deliver childcare. Yet, we've had some discussions with our board about and our staff right now about potentially establishing relationships with community groups to develop programs for our students. And so I know whether it's local athletic clubs, perhaps even connecting with a Y to figure out how it is that we could put some new unique programs in place that could help fill that gap. As well as I will say that I am also open to, even while we're recommending right now, our recommendation is going to be for an all virtual. That doesn't mean that we have to stay I think one of the things that is going to be important for us to make sure we're embracing is looking at a potential return to school as a process on a continuum, rather than just we're going to do this or potentially do this. We have plans for for the different phases in the state of Michigan and what it is that we're going to do, but that doesn't mean that we can't think about an ever-changing environment and pretty quickly evolving over time as the fall goes to maybe consider a different way to provide education where there is a relief from parents, that burden is lifted, and also provides something in person for our family. So I know that I'm open to thinking about that, but I think the underlying point to that question is this is really going to be a challenging environment, and we're aware of that, so we're going to try to leverage some partnerships to try to help a little bit.
Thank you, Mark. Patrick?
So that's one of the things we're trying to wrap our heads around as well. How do we provide that additional support for parents who need some type of childcare? So we've got a couple options we're looking at right now that they're not completely vetted, but that's part of our updated proposal to the board on the 20th. So our goal is to provide some relief there, whether it's internally or working with the third party as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we've had several people ask this question as well, and it is related to virtual learning. The general premise is a virtual education is not the same as a face-to-face education, and there's a concern that some students will not be as successful in a virtual environment as others. And so what safety nets are in place to help those children who maybe aren't keeping up with where they should be in terms of their education?
So I know I'll start. For us, and our remote schedule is going to mirror our virtual schedule. And so we've built in time so that if a student needs one-on-one or small group assistance with the teacher, that time is built in. Also, a big part of our plan is having students in face-to-face, as soon as that is practical and we're able to do that. And so for our parents who want that face-to-face experience because it's best for their child, even though we're starting the year remotely, our goal is to still get everyone back in as soon as possible. So the way we're looking at it as this is a temporary time in the remote learning environment until they're able to come back in the building and have the face-to-face that they've signed up for. Our big goal is to give parents options. I know 6 through 12, we've been able to set it up so that our students can keep their schedule from the spring. Even though we're starting remote, when we migrate to the building, our students will have the opportunity to either A, choose to go back in person, or B, stay remote for the full year. If they choose to stay remote for the full year, they'll still be able to be live via the computer in the classroom with their same teachers and their same classmates throughout the school year. And so when we talked to our students, we got feedback from them. Their number one thing was, we want Bloomfield Hills teachers and we want our classes. We want our AP, our IB, I want my music class, I want choir, I want theater, I want the electives, I want my art class that I signed up for. And so I'm very grateful that the Bloomfield Hills teachers stepped up and said, you know what, it's going to be a crazy year, we understand. No one's really done this before, but we'll do it. And by saying we'll do it, it means we'll have maybe 10 kids in our class, 20 kids at home, and those kids at home are all able, whether it's Zoom or live stream, whatever the teacher chooses, to be able to still be part of the class, but be remote for the school year. And that was such a huge win for the students. That information went out to them yesterday, and I've already heard from several saying, I'm so relieved to know that I get all my classes I wanted, I get all Bloomfield Hills teachers, I get something. We got to remember, our students lost everything last year, and now they're coming back, and they feel like they're losing everything again. What's in it for the students? They may not be able to do activities. They may not be able to do athletics. They're not coming into the building. What are they going to get? And for them, the one win they have right now is they get their schedule and they get their teachers.
Thank you, Patrick. Mark?
Yeah, I think Pat made some great points there, and just to add on one additional thing, I will be the first to say that virtual learning is no substitute from a compatibility standpoint. Like this is somehow going to be the same. I think it can be robust, and I think it can be the next best thing we have given our situation. But as far as delivering the excitement and experience of seeing, being in a chemistry lab and doing a lab yourself, it's just not the same. So that being said, we have a couple of things that I know are also going to be the case in Bloomfield in any virtual environment as well. But we have instructional specialists and reading specialists that are master interventionists for kids. We're working right now with those groups to figure out what their interventions would look like and how we can still make them available. We've got counselors ready to be mobilized to provide supports for kids if they're struggling, to provide some additional support. We talked about our, I mentioned earlier in the presentation that we sent an email yesterday that announced our schedules. Part of our schedules have some built-in one-on-one or small group time for teachers to work with students to set up individual meetings or small group sessions for them to do that, so that we can make sure we're trying to capture what would just kind of naturally happen, kind of nonchalantly and sometimes planned in our elementary, middle, and high schools, in our post-secondary school, trying to get that to work virtually. And then one additional thing I'd like to say is our administrators came back to the district last week, and we actually had a meeting last Thursday with all of our administrators. We will be involving our teachers in this as well. We created some committees to look specifically at two aspects of support for students in virtual environment. One is what are new ways of thinking about proactive steps that we need to have to help to prevent kids from struggling in that environment? Are there check-in protocols? Are there things that individual teachers can do? Can administrators rethink how they would, normally administrator can walk down the hall and check on 20 kids between two classes. Now we don't have that opportunity. So how can they check in on students in a virtual environment? So from a proactive side, we're gonna have a group that's looking at that. And then also from a reactive side, when kids are struggling, how do we intervene very, very quickly with that? And our administrators in this meeting raised their hands strongly, and they said, lean on us, use us. We can put together programs in our building that in some cases are unique to our building, and others we can do this commonly across elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools to address the needs of our students. And so we're actively working on that right now. And then the final thing I want to say is I think there is a general commitment from everybody in our organization that works to support student learning in Birmingham to make sure that we have the most robust environment we have for online learning come this fall. Our schedules reflect that. We have a new learning management system or platform that we're going to be introduced that's going to make it easier for parents to monitor what's happening with students. It's going to make it easier for students to operate in their with their learning and ensure learning with their classes and their teachers. It's going to make it easier for our teachers in the long run to deliver virtual education. So we've talked about that word quite a bit in Birmingham heading into the fall, and it's our deep commitment to make sure that condition is realized for all kids.
Thank you, Mark. The next question deals with special education and special needs students. The question specifically is, how are the needs of special needs students being addressed if they don't have capacity to learn in a virtual environment?
So I want to, Pat, I'll jump in first. Maybe we can flip flop. I want to just take everybody back to the spring for just a moment when we were first faced with this question, and that was just a heavy burden on all of us to try to figure out, and there's no denying the fact that those that need in-person learning the most are going to have the most challenges heading into this environment. And our specialized instruction and student service department led by Laura Mahler and her supervisors just did an amazing job thinking creatively with teachers and service providers about how it is that we could do our work virtually. And so I saw this amazing, this was sent to me actually, it was a recorded lesson that a teacher had done. This is a speech therapist had done for students virtually so that they can continue to maintain therapies in a virtual environment. And that was happening all over the place across all of our special educators. And so part of it is going to be creatively thinking about the delivery system. Part of it is also going to be ensuring that critical therapies are still in place for some of our students. So we're right now trying to figure out how we're going to be delivering speech therapies, OT, PT, social work in a virtual environment. And in some cases, you know, we may need to think creatively about that and adjust our schedule to accommodate the needs of our students. And also we're going to be having some conversations with our, with some of our administrators about, again, our openness to thinking creatively about our schedule. Instead of thinking about it as we have to be all virtual and virtual only, there may be variations in schedules that we can consider as the school year unfolds. And so, that's something that'll be part of our thinking as well.
Thanks, Mark. So kind of in addition to what Mark said, our focus has been looking at our students with the most complex needs and those that require the greatest amount of support, including those students with IEPs. So we've spent Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yesterday, and in a little bit today, we'll get back to work on the plan I've kind of alluded to that will come out August 20th. And it's going to look really different than probably anything any other school district has done in the state of Michigan. And we're looking at whether it's staged or phasing in different things, but where can we provide opportunities for our students to learn and giving them the option of virtual or in person, regardless of whether they have an IEP or not. I don't want to just assume if a student has an IEP that their parents and they would select to be in person. They may actually prefer virtual. And so I'm kind of excited to see what the final details of that plan is going to be. And I think, again, there'll be quite a few wins for all three groups, our students, our parents, and for our staff members as well when we get to that presentation on the 20th. I wish I had more specific details to share, but after our board meeting on Thursday, we pivoted, went a little different direction. And so those plans are incredibly fluid right now as we work through them. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question relates to how, interestingly, how even a global pandemic can become political. But there's obviously a lot of activity happening in Lansing regarding the governor's five-phase program of reopening Michigan and some of the differences she's having with the legislature and with her executive orders. Are either of you, first of all, what kind of contacts are you having with your state elected officials and providing input as to what you think should be done with the reopening of schools? And are either of you concerned that the governor's executive orders may overarch your plans and take you in a direction that you maybe hadn't anticipated?
Let me start with the state officials. The state officials have been great, open the conversation 24/7, advocating for public education nonstop. As far as the governor's executive orders, like I said earlier, expect the unexpected. We can do all this incredible work, have a great plan. Everyone says yes. Community says yes. Students, staff, yeah, a great plan. And then we move back into phase 3. We can only control what we can control. And so we're not spending a lot of time at Bloomfield Hills worried about what the governor is going to do and, the ifs and the thens that we can't control. We have to focus on what we can do. And what we can do is make the most comprehensive, robust plan that we can put forward that meets the needs of as many students, parents, and staff members as possible. What happens after that happens. Whatever we're doing work-wise, we know that one way or another, all this great work, whether we use it now or later, will be valuable as we move the district forward into 21st century learning and what 21st century learning should look like. So nothing's being lost along the way. So she changed it the day before kids are supposed to return. She changes it, so be it. At some point, we will be going back to school, whether it's 50%, 10%, 100%, and all the plans and protocols we worked on will be used and implemented at that time.
Thank you, Patrick. Mark?
I would agree with our playing in the catcher's position a little bit. We're getting pitched balls. I wish we could signal every pitch that's coming in and it would land as we've called it. and so we're just responding to what it is that we're getting and making sure that we're getting good counsel with respect to interpreting any of the orders and responding to them. I do want to say something about the responsiveness of our government officials so far. I've had several conversations through this pandemic with Senator Baer, talked to Mari Manoogian several times. I was part of a town hall that was hosted by Kara Bolden. And even at the federal level, we have had significant outreach to superintendents. I was on a Zoom a couple of weeks ago with Congressman Andy Levin, and I think people are listening. I will say that I never imagined that a response to a health crisis would become quite so political. But all I can pledge, kind of to Pat's main point, is all I can pledge is, given the realities that we're facing right now, how do we balance in the best way possible two critically important things in the public sphere? One is the provision of public education for kids who need it, and desperately need to move forward in their development. We have that obligation, and how do we do that safely, where we keep everybody safe? And no matter what is coming to us from the government, we have those two obligations kind of forefront in our minds: balancing public health and public education at all times. And so I've really tried to stay out of the politics of it. But I will say that our representatives, senators at the state and federal level, have been conducting outreach, and we've been sharing with them what our needs are heading into this school year.
Thank you, Mark. I think we have time for one more question, and then we're going to allow each of you gentlemen to offer some closing thoughts if you would like to. The question is, many parents have taken measures into their own hands as it relates to what they think is best for their children. And we're hearing about learning pods being established, and private individuals opening tutoring centers and homeschooling. What kind of support are the school districts giving parents who may decide to go their own path in terms of how and where their children are educated?
I would say a couple things. For Bloomfield parents, before you decide to go your own path, please, let's have a conversation. Even if you decide you want to form a pod, and those started popping up on the West Coast, Southern California area, Fairfax County, Virginia area, parts of Atlanta, Peachtree, Georgia area, Cobb County area. So that's kind of where it kind of started, in those three hotbeds. But there might be a way to partner. However, if you disenroll from the school district and you decide to just homeschool, or you decide to just hire a tutor or things like that, it kind of takes away that opportunity to have that partnership. I think there's a way we can blend with those who want to do a pod and have their own private tutor, so they can also be part of the Bloomfield Hills School District, still get the Bloomfield Hills curriculum, and still get access to a Bloomfield Hills teacher, and have it as a win-win situation. So I would, highly recommend that they reach out to me and have that conversation. If it works out, it fits, great. If not, parents are going to make the decisions that they feel are best for their children. I get that. As a father of three, two in college, one that's going into her senior year in high school, I have the same decisions I need to make. What's in the best interest of my child? Thank you.
Yeah, I would reiterate similar sentiments, but I just want to say one thing with respect to how our community is responding to this crisis with help and support. We've just had tremendous parental support. Our community service and philanthropy efforts from parents throughout the spring were incredible. We had a program at one of our high schools that expanded district-wide, and it was really just a family supporting other families in the crisis situation in the spring. We're hearing of the same thing with families supporting one another, creating small groups for childcare needs and other things. I just think this is really a testament to both of our communities that we have parents doing this. And I will say to repeat what Pat mentioned. I would also like the opportunity, if any parent is concerned about what's happening in the public schools or what our response has been, I would want to talk to them. I think that the conversations that I've had with parents, I know people through email can argue more strongly, I think, than they would sometimes when they just have a conversation over the phone. And it's hard now because we can't have face-to-face conversations. But those that I've talked to over the phone, once we're able to listen to each other's viewpoints and hear some of the shared concerns, I think there's a common understanding, there's a better understanding that can take place. And I would welcome that. And I really am excited to continue to work with our community about supporting all of our kids in this. Again, it's going to continue to be a challenging environment this fall.
Thank you, Mark. We are nearing the end of our time, so I do want to provide a brief moment for some final thoughts, and I'll actually return to Craig Thiel from the Citizens Research Council. I believe Craig is still on the call. Craig, do you have any parting thoughts for our guest today? Maybe he's off. He was on a minute ago. Kelly, do you see him?
I don't see him anymore.
Okay, we'll move on to Mark.
Okay, thanks. So I just want to start by just really sharing a couple of thank yous. I want to thank the Bloomfield Birmingham Chamber for this opportunity on an annual basis. It would have been nice to have a little bit more coffee with you all today, but I do appreciate it. I think at the core of what I know Pat and I are both trying to do with our staffs is really try to, the best way that we can in a highly polarized and contentious environment, bring everybody together. We need to be as respectful as we can with respect to where everybody's coming at with this health crisis. We need to be helpful to one another. We need to go back to our character education values that have been an anchor of Birmingham Public Schools for years. So how are we good to people? How do we engage in civic discourse and critical discourse so that we can try to stay away from mutually exclusive arguments and create opportunities where we can come together as a community. And so that's really where my focus is. Again, obviously everyone's going to anxiously anticipate, the Board of Education's question in our decision tonight. But I want everybody to know that this opportunity to connect business to public education, which is such a critical partnership moving forward. It's incredibly important to me. It's important to our Board of Education. And I'm going to do everything I can as we move into the fall of 2020, everything I can as superintendent to bring us together in order that we can meet our common needs. And that's make this community as successful as it can be, commercially, successfully for our families socially, and successfully for our students educationally. So thanks for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it. And I can't wait to have a muffin and a cup of coffee next year when this is in the rearview mirror.
Thank you, Mark. Pat?
I'll echo some of Mark's statements as well. Appreciate the opportunity and the support. And one thing I'd really, really like to throw out there, I think it's important not just as school districts, but as parents and community members and neighboring communities, that we really find ways to leverage all of our ideas and really spend more time working together. I know with everything that's going on and how things have been politicized, things are very divisive, not just in our country, but sometimes in our communities. So great ideas we might have, great ideas Birmingham might have, great ideas from Birmingham and Bloomfield's parents. We all have the same goal, right? To do what's best for our kids, to give our kids every opportunity to have the best experience they possibly can have and learn as much as they possibly can while in school. And so sometimes in education, we really get in these silos where, our teaching and learning groups just working together, our special ed groups just working together. I really hope that as we move forward the rest of the summer, we seek opportunities between the two communities, our parents in our two communities, our school boards in our two communities, to get together, share ideas, share thoughts. And there's no doubt that, more minds, the better. And I think we could really have a joint effort on a lot of plans and a lot of things that really solve the needs. Maybe there's a building here that I'm going to have open that Mark could use that I wouldn't need. Maybe vice versa. Maybe we have a plan for a model they haven't looked at. Maybe they have a plan to do something special that we haven't looked at. At the end of the day, when kids win, we all win. And the more we can do that to make sure they win, the better we're at our jobs and the happier the kids are going to be. So thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, that brings us to the end of our forum this morning. I want to thank everybody who's been on the call for your thoughtful questions and your consideration. I want to thank our sponsors, Birmingham Bluefield Credit Union. Thank you so much for all you do to support the local business community. I want to thank the Citizens Research Council, Craig Thiel, and I see Ann Burns is on the call. So Ann, if you could please extend our thanks to Craig. And certainly to Mark and Pat, who have very large jobs that aren't going to be getting any easier anytime soon. So we wish you all the luck and want to let you know that the Birmingham Bluefield Chamber and our nearly 700 members are here to support our public education. We know how critically important it is to the overall quality of life in our communities and the vital role it plays. So we're here for you in anything that you may need going forward. So with that, we'll bring this to a conclusion. Thank you very much, and hope we'll see you all soon at a live event. I do want to mention that we do have a member coffee on the 27th of August. Is that correct, Kelly? We're actually doing it live. This is going to be our first in-person event. It's going to be at the Rotary Pavilion at Springdale Park. It's going to be BYOC. So sorry, Mark, you're going to have to bring your own coffee again because of restrictions, we're not going to be able to provide any food or drink, but please stop, grab your favorite cup of coffee or make it, head over to the pavilion at 8 a.m. and do some networking with your fellow chamber members. So again, thank you all very much. Have a great day. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everybody.